Welcome back to Tiempo. The Supreme Court will hear arguments about President Obama's immigration plan to shield 4 to 5 million immigrants from deportation. Enlightening us today about all of this, our good friend, immigration attorney Christopher Cabanillas, and Jose Perez, legal director from Latino Justice. Naturally, there are thousands of people throughout the New York metropolitan area keeping an eye on what happens. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio had a response by saying this: tens of thousands of families in New York City and millions across the country move one step closer to the justice they deserve. We're hopeful that the Supreme Court will soon affirm as the settled law of the land that President Obama's executive action on immigration is lawful and that immigrant parents and children across the country are respected and protected. Your thoughts on hearing the mayor's comments?
Yeah, as we know, this lawsuit was brought by Texas and 25 other states, but at the same time, 15 states, including New York, and 73 mayors and cities filed a brief in support of the Department of Justice appeal seeking to reverse the lower court decision.
And if my understanding is correct, it was Mayor de Blasio and I think the Los Angeles Mayor Garcetti who were two or three
Correct.
who were spearheading that effort. Is that,
Yes.
is that
and again,
correct?
these are different constituencies. Again, those urban areas where there's a large number of immigrants welcome the benefits that would accrue if, in fact, DAPA and expanded DACA would go forward.
Walk me through the timeline here. Here we are in late January.
Right.
The Supreme Court will get the case. Arguments will be presented when?
Sure, they announce it now, so they'll be briefing it soon. There'll be oral arguments. All that's going to start taking place by the end of March, more likely in April.
Okay.
And then a decision is expected by June with a rollout, hopefully, depending if it gets approved,
yes,
probably by the summertime.
Okay. So June, president is out of office in early next year. Only 6 or 7 months to sort of get the ball rolling if, in fact, it goes that way. Is that enough time to implement the plan?
I believe it is, because when the president first announced this in November 2014, the Department of Homeland Security, USCIS Immigration Services began developing the infrastructure to handle the applications and how to issue these deferred actions or deferred removals and employment authorizations.
So go ahead.
That's right, and it was only, remember, it was just 2 days before it was actually supposed to be rolled out and start taking applications.
Yes.
That the injunction came in.
So the framework is already laid.
That's right.
So once you get the green light, and that's all they're waiting
We'll
for,
be ready to go.
we can make it happen. All right, let me dig deep for the prognosticator in you. Which way does this go before the Supreme Court?
I'm very hopeful that it's going to be upheld, that it's going to be approved, that the Obama plan will allow to take place, and that the work permits will start coming.
On what basis do you have that confidence? Well,
for years, you know, it's sort of well established that the president can dictate basically who can get deported and not.
Yes.
And it's a natural consequence of that to say, well, they can now have, if they're not going to get deported, they're allowed to apply for work permits. So it makes sense. It's good for the economy, and I think that's the way it's going to roll out.
But it's not a done deal in either one of your eyes, right? It's not for sure. We shouldn't start playing in the party now.
No, it's not a slam dunk, but again, like Chris, I have guarded optimism. Again, every president dating back to the 50s, President Eisenhower, both Republican and Democratic, have exercised this executive authority to determine immigration priorities. Congress has clearly delegated that to the president, and I think there are scholars on both sides of the aisle who agree with that. And therefore, again, I think there's optimism that the court will strike down the lower court rulings and the injunction and allow the program to go forward.
Let me take the other side.
Sure.
2 lower courts have already stated their decision, and well, I don't know how anxious the Supreme Court is to overturn what 2 other courts already did.
Well, I think that they're not even worried about so much about that aspect. They're going to rule as to the basic sort of decision as to the constitutionality of whether this action is permitted.
I agree. And basically, the Supreme Court in prior instances, again, the notorious Arizona SB 1070 anti-immigrant law a few years ago, where the court struck down much of the law, saying, again, states do not have a right to dictate to the federal government about immigration enforcement priorities. That is a role specifically within the federal government.
What irony do you see that if, in fact, as you're arguing, that the president ultimately does have the decision in deciding who gets deported and who doesn't, that at the same time that this is happening, there are so many other activists who are accusing the president of being the deporter-in-chief, and in fact last week filed a lawsuit against, I think, ICE and the Department of Homeland Security, saying that has to change. You know, it's almost a double-edged sword, if you will.
Yes, more people have been removed, particularly Latino immigrants, hardworking men and women, during this president's administration. And finally, at the urging of activists and advocates around the country, that he finally decided to exercise his authority as we opened up with that Congress had failed to act. So it is kind of, as you put it, a double-edged sword. But we're trying to have our cake and eat it too.
We'll end on that note. Guys, always in education. Thank you very much for, and when the decision is made, get ready, because we'll have you back.